was that thing, Blake?
It sounded like an animal. But I swear to God, it was standing on 2 feet.
Daddy, are we gonna die?
No, it's my job to protect you.
What's wrong with Daddy?
G'day guys, welcome back to my channel and time for another episode of Luke's Reviews. On today's video, it's January, and you know what that means, or more precisely, we used to know, because for a long stretch of time, January was often considered to be the dumping ground for studios to release films that they really had no expectation for. That hasn't been the case as of late. There have been some very surprising January releases. So, Leigh Whannell, who's made a really solid career in horror, is hoping to buck that trend, and let's see if he does in Wolfman. Following the news of his father's passing, Blake, joined by his wife and daughter, make a visit to his father's farm to soak in the sights and sounds of the Oregon wildlife. But what they didn't have in store was to be mercilessly hunted by a creature within the forest, and for Blake to find himself becoming something else entirely. As I said, Leigh Whannell has always been a really exciting voice in the horror genre. He first came onto the scene as a partner with James Wan and brought us the first few Saw movies. That partnership later continued with the Insidious franchise, and he branched out with his own work, directing an underrated action film called Upgrade. But for me, Whannell's best work came in 2020, when he breathed new life into the Invisible Man persona, updating it for modern times and themes, but also constructing an incredibly tense thriller around the concept. And clearly I wasn't the only one to feel that way, because Whannell has now been handed the reins yet again to a classic universal horror monster, the Wolfman. So let's see if he can stick the landing again, and what I will say is that he does for the first 10 minutes. The opening prologue to the Wolfman was brilliant at instigating a very tense, suspenseful atmosphere. The camera work was great at just immediately racketing up the tension. You became instantly concerned about negative space and breath vapor. I don't think I've ever been as on edge of my seat from seeing breath vapor. After that prologue comes to a close, though, we cut 30 years later, and for the remaining 90 minutes, this film became one of the most disappointing cinematic experiences I have had in a long time. I was bitterly let down with Wolfman. This was not a good movie. Credit where it's due, I can comfortably say that Leigh Whannell's direction was never at fault. His dynamic use of lighting and camera work did so much to try and keep the movie feeling like there was effort put into it. The body horror was very effective in its quite grisly presentation. And one thing I will say is that we see a lot of perspective switches through wolf vision. I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but all I could see in those sequences was to be reminded of Bonnie Tyler's music video for Total Eclipse of the Heart. And if you have seen the film, I guarantee you know what I'm talking about. Christopher Abbott, too, was a great choice to have as the lead role, because Abbott is such a strong character actor, and it makes sense for his talents for him to spend more time as Beast than he actually does as Man. I thought he was a really good pick. As for everything else in the film, well, that kind of ranges for just unmemorable to the downright dreadful. And let's look at the downright dreadful, shall we? Because whilst I did just sit here and I said that I commend Leigh Whannell for his direction in this film, his screenplay, on the other hand, is atrocious. It is staggering to me how a script can feel so empty and hollow, and yet almost feel as if things are moving way too fast. I wasn't expecting the film to take place over the course of one night, but I actually think it hindered much of the character's opportunity for development and progression. Take Blake's wife, Charlotte, for instance, who was an abysmally written character and not that much better performed, because, look, I'm sure Garner is a very talented actress, but here she brings nothing to this role. And I don't mean that she just doesn't add anything. I mean that it quite literally looks like she is sleepwalking through the set at points. As for the prosthetic work, yes, some of it is impressive, but at other points, especially when Blake becomes the full Wolfman, it just looks like Christopher Abbott is suffocating in prosthetics. Also, he doesn't even look that much like a wolf. He looks more like a troll. But most disappointingly, it appeared to me that this project was just a complete missed opportunity. I'm not saying that it had to completely reinvent the wheel like The Invisible Man did, or even touch into prominent societal themes. But with Wolfman, there were numerous occasions where it looked as if the story was setting up deeper, more complex themes to be discussed, such as a loving father figure who has no choice but to transform into a hideous, carnivorous monster in front of his daughter. What kind of psychological effect would that have on the other? There's also a relationship between Christopher Abbott's Blake and Charlotte. Their relationship is on the brink. What will this add? Can they come together? Can they reconcile? Or is it just going to drive them further apart? All of those things were set up. The groundwork was laid. And then the moment they arrive at this cabin in the forest and shit hits the fan, all of that is dropped. Because the movie then settles to just be a very mundane, unimpressive home invasion. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. I had such high hopes for Wolfman after seeing what Leigh Whannell is capable of by taking these century-old icons of cinema and bringing them into a new light. But with the Wolfman, I'm sorry to say that this simply did nothing for me. I'll commend Whannell's direction and Abbott bringing the physicality, but with a lackluster female lead and a screenplay that took the easiest route possible, Wolfman will likely be remembered as one of my lows of 2025. So I'm going to give Wolfman a 2.5 out of 10. I know that that sounds low, and I think I'm factoring my disappointment into the score more than I normally would, but what can I say? This was a real significant letdown. So, those were my thoughts on Wolfman. Let me know, have you had a chance to see the film yet? What did you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And my question to you, quite a straightforward one here, but what do you think is the most iconic classic movie monster? But there's all the time we have for today, so thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.
Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button. And if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.